Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
That was okay, but I'm gonna need more. Need more. It's a dreary Sunday afternoon, and we got to bring some energy today. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jonathan Fitzwiley. I'm the artistic director at Miss Magic Theater, and today it is my incredible honor and pleasure to be able to host this Q&A, if you will, that is hosted by the South County South County Social Justice Coalition. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about the coalition, do some quick introductions, do a bit of table setting, and then I'm not one to stand on ceremony, the one to really kind of get into it here. So first, a bit about the South County Social Justice Coalition. The South County Social Justice Coalition came together in 2023 as concerned members of faith groups, helping organizations, and concerned people of all kinds to form the South County Social Justice Coalition. Since that time, they have published a weekly online newsletter that informs readers about special events or ongoing resources related to many different social justice issues in the South County community. They have also held quarterly meetings tied to a theme with an invited speaker and a discussion time. When the coalition extended an invitation to Rhode Island's Attorney General, they didn't initially understand the full import and impact this meeting would have. The South County Social Justice Coalition is open to anyone. Please sign one of the mailing lists or click on the QR code in order to receive notice of upcoming meetings or the weekly newsletter. Since the coalition has no funding and no budget, but certainly has a lot of spirit and sweat equity and care and concern for community, and since the expenses for this meeting include maintenance staff, fire department staff, and event insurance, the coalition would greatly appreciate any donation you could make in the basket provided. Okay, so before I introduce the heroes of these organizations, mutual aid, my friends. Mutual aid. It takes a lot to do stuff like this. It's not tossed off. There's insurance. There's getting people together and organizing calendars and all this. With respect, none of it is free. Okay?
Not free.
Well, I hope not. So, for everybody else, really please show up and support in that way. Now, again, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the leadership team of the coalition. So if you all would stand and be recognized, we have Joanne Haynes, who is the newsletter editor, Etta Zasloff, who is the co-newsletter editor, Leslie Chouinard, who is a member and an important organizer for today, and last but certainly not least, Johnette Rodriguez, who is the connector and facilitator of this event. And,
You always forget me.
and a vicious cycle continues, but no, I'm gonna say Jim Moore, also a stalwart member and organizer for today. So make sure you say hello to them after our program. So a bit about the program. I'm going to ask our Attorney General here 3 questions, really, and then we're going to open up to a Q&A. A couple of table setting notes about that. Okay, Q&A stands for question and answer. Okay. It does not stand for monologue with a question mark at the end. Okay? So, I'm really just asking that if you get called on to raise a question, ask a question, make sure that you are asking a question that our Attorney General can answer or respond to or address, that would be great. And then on a larger note, you know, we appreciate that these are tense times, contemporarily, historically, or whatever the case may be. Intention comes from plurality, and the plurality of this nation, and the plurality of this nation is what makes it great, in my opinion. And so, in circling back to talking about tension, really, tension happens in two ways, right? Okay, there's the creative tension of people who believe in the American experiment, okay? People who believe in the republic and are seeking to work toward making a better republic. We love creative tension. Okay? We love creative tension. I doubt that if I was to meet everybody in this room that I would walk away saying, man, I have had the same exact life experience as everybody in this room. That's probably not likely to happen. But creative tension says we can work towards something together. Destructive tension is no longer interested in the American experiment. Destructive tension is no longer interested in bettering the republic. Destructive tension is not helpful here. Can we be square on that? There's constructive tension and there's destructive tension. Constructive tension, let's do that. That's what the experiment requires. Destructive tension, it hurts the experiment. It hurts the community. It hurts the work we are all trying to do. Okay? So I'm going to come back to the Q&A piece of it. Do I believe in the American experiment? If you do, please ask a question. Do you believe in the betterment of the republic? If you do, please ask a question. Is my question also valuable to the group? Also, I know it's going to be valuable to you, but is my question also valuable to the group? Okay? We'll circle back to that, table setting, ground rules, and things of that nature, but wanted to sort of do that. And now I want to turn our attention to you, sir. First of all, how are we?
Doing great.
I'd love to hear it. So we're going to pass the mic back and forth. But the first question we have today. In these fractious times, many public officials, regardless of political affiliation, have remained silent in the face of actions taken by this presidential administration. In your role as the Attorney General, can you discuss your personal decision to speak truth to power and be a vocal opponent of these policies?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me thank everyone who's here and the organizers. It's great to be with you, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I think if you know what's right, it doesn't really take a lot of time or effort to figure out what to do. And then if you have the skill set and people with you that can do something about it, then you just do it. I can't point to a crystallization of when we decided to act, other than to say that as early as last summer, the summer of 2024, myself and some of my Democratic Attorney General colleagues were concerned that regardless of who the Democratic candidate was, at the time it was President Biden, that we were in trouble in the battleground states. And, you know, my colleagues in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, were really worried and about what the President Trump in his second term might do. Because we had seen enough of it in the first term to be concerned about some of his policies. And we were worried that some of the initial stabilizations that were there the first time wouldn't be there the second time. And so we agreed back in the May-June time period that we were going to tie our staffs together and ask them to think about whether it be looking at Project 2025 or what the president was saying on the campaign trail. We were going to look at those issues and begin to research the law around them and have it ready. And we were hoping for the best from our political perspective, but preparing for the worst. And so when the president was elected, that work just continued. And then when he took office, we were ready to go. So it wasn't like in January we had to decide what to do. We knew what we had to do, and we were ready to do it. And I think that's why, and I think we brought collectively 11 cases. We've had the kind of success we've had. I mean, a lot of the reason we've had that success, most of it really, is because our staffs are incredible. The AGs, we talk 3 days a week. The staffs speak every day, and they really are incredibly talented. And I hope I'll get a chance to reflect on that a little bit more as we talk. But one of them sitting right over here, South Kingstown's own Sarah Rice, who candidly, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my administration was, Sarah deciding, as I understand it, to come home to Rhode Island during COVID, because she has argued, leave the Trump work aside, has argued some of our most significant cases, defended our gun safety laws, for example, argued in the Supreme Court, the Block Island Champlain's Marina expansion case, so critical to environmental protection in Rhode Island, won that case there against pretty heavy odds, argued a case involving the transfer of our largest utility, and won significant benefits for Rhode Island. So without Sarah and the team that she works with, our job would be much more difficult. But to get back to it, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm among the staffs. They're great lawyers. My fellow attorneys general get along great. I think we have some leadership qualities that we share. And I think in this moment, it is a moment for attorneys general. We are lawyers. We are not afraid of a fight. We know who we represent, and that's the people of our state and the values that we collectively hold, and frankly, the rule of law in our Constitution. And so, warming to this fight was not a moment's decision, but it wasn't a hard one. We just knew what was right. And we knew that the way we could move the needle in the direction of the rule of law and what's right was to bring lawsuits against the administration and fight back against them.
Thank you for that response. I'm curious, and this is my own question. You connect with the other attorneys general, hopefully not in a signal chat that gets leaked to everybody, but...
We're on Zoom.
Oh, you're on Zoom, well, there you go.
Not team, but it's secure as far as
when it comes to the other attorneys general in the country who either maybe in opposition, is it just like, I guess we don't talk to you? What is that sort of space? It's just like, oh, we just don't talk to you.
Yeah, so it's not that we don't talk to them, but you have to remember it's very difficult to work with attorneys general, 18 of whom just went to court to try to overturn the election in 2020. I mean, they're just, if you were to meet them, I'm not saying they're bad people, but their views are so disconsonant with what I believe our democracy stands for. They're hard to work with. I mean, there was no basis to overturn the 2020 election. But when you have 18 Republican colleagues that went to court in Pennsylvania to try to overturn it, those are hard people to work with. So we have one conference a year in Washington where we are together. And look, they're free to join our cases. And many of our cases bring relief. I'm sure we'll talk about them. So take, for example, some of our work involving funding freezes. The only states that get relief from those funding freezes are the states that sued. So the 22 states in the District of Columbia get relief, so their money flows. And the states that don't sue, the red states, they don't. So, I think that puts my Republican colleagues in a really tough spot. Do they really believe that eliminating USAID, that through its funding buys an enormous amount of soy from the heartland, like in Kansas, is hurting Kansas farmers that's a good policy for their constituents? That's for them to answer, but I don't lose any sleep at night about the inability to work across the aisle with that group, because anytime they want to join a case or support a case that we're bringing that tries to push back against the administration as they sideline the Congress, as President Trump sidelines the Congress. You think about that for a minute. That's what he's doing. Whenever he stops federally appropriated, congressionally appropriated money from coming to Rhode Island, like 1/5 of our budget, 1/5 of our budget, 1/3 of our budget are federal funds. When the president froze that, okay, when he acts like that, what he's saying is, I don't care what the Congress said. I'm going to stop the flow of money because I don't think it should come. So he's taking Congress and telling the Congress, I don't care what you say. And then when judges agree with us and our team, Sarah and our team, when the judge agrees with us, then he and his acolytes undermine the judiciary to the point where Chief Justice Roberts has to come out and say, impeaching a judge is not an answer to a ruling you don't like. I mean, think about that for a minute. I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, prosecuted some, very significant criminals here in the state of Rhode Island, along with Chief Moynihan back there and Eric Yankee when he was ATF, he's now on my staff. I mean, all those individuals, after they were convicted, accepted their penalty and many times went to federal prison. No one talked about impeaching Judge Lisi or Judge Torres back then. But the president thinks if he gets a ruling he doesn't like, impeachment's appropriate. So he undermines the judiciary, sidelines the Congress, and that leaves power in one place, in the executive branch. So the tensions that our founders, our framers, you can read about it in the Federalist Papers, you young high school students over there, if you are in high school, or you could be in college. High school? Well, go get your Federalist Papers. I'm sure you each have a copy. And if you read those, what you'll see is that the founders set up our system of government so that the judiciary, the judicial branch, was the last word on what the law says. And the Congress to pass the laws, and for the president to faithfully execute them, not change them. And spending laws are just that, laws. So when President Trump does that, what he's saying is, I want all the power. Well, that's not our system of government. And that is where the real danger lies. These cases, you can lose the forest from the trees. The trees are the cases. The forest is the authoritarian bent of the administration.
So we're going to get to our second question. Across the nation, state attorneys general are taking to the courts to challenge the legality of a number of this presidential administration's executive orders and directives, as you've obviously just spoken to. Could you tell us about the suit your office is pursuing for Judge McConnell? And more broadly, can you tell us which lawsuits your office is involved with, either independently or in conjunction with other states? I know you'd mentioned, we get to talk about it. You do.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to talking about it. So there are 22 attorneys general that are Democrats, Rhode Island and the District of Columbia. Are there 23 or 22, Sarah?
It's 22 states with the District of Columbia.
Plus the district, right? Yeah, so 22 states plus the district. So there's 23 of us. We talk for about an hour, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in a lot of those conversations are, okay, the Trump administration, as we forecasted, has done X. Okay, we need to push back. We need to file a lawsuit. Which states have been working on that? Remember, I mentioned the preparation period. Each office took various subject areas. So, for example, we took the rule of law, which I'm not really sure even what that means, but ask Sarah afterwards. There's a lot of work. Sounded a little vague to me, but so some offices focused on immigration, and some focused on choice and abortion access in states that haven't banned it as federal government may go after that, for example. Some focused on conditional funding. So, and that may be what we looked at, I don't recall, but conditioning federal funding on compliance with whatever the president decides the priorities of the administration are, whether we like those priorities here or not. And so, and just before I get into the rest of it, I want to make this point because sometimes I forget to make it. You know, the president thinks about it as his money. Well, it's not his money, it's all of our money, right? April 15th is coming, right? We're all going to pay our federal taxes. And that money goes down to Washington, and the whole idea is to put it in a pot and then send it back out, right? Some of it has to run the federal government and pay for our collective defense, but then some of it comes back to us, right? And so when the president says, I'm not sending it, you know, that's our money he's taking. So we have a right to be pissed off about it, upset about it, angry about it. So in any event, so we talk about who's been working on a particular issue, where should we bring the lawsuit, and which states want to co-lead it. And typically out of the 23, there'll be 3, 4, 5 states that will co-lead the litigation. So what does that mean? Well, the staffs of those offices, and ultimately the attorneys general in those offices who are responsible for that work, well, our staffs, if we're a co-lead, will draft the paperwork. So what does that paperwork look like? Well, that's a complaint against the federal government and its agencies. It'll be a motion for a temporary restraining order. Typically, those are the two things that we'll need to prepare and file. And those things are lengthy documents, as those of you who are either lawyers or follow the law will know. And a lot of times those have to be done very quickly. But the lawyers will, it's a little bit like making sausage, I suppose, but they'll split up the work among those 3 or 4 co-lead offices, and then they will get that paperwork ready to go, and we'll file it really quickly. So we filed 3 here. Of the 11 that have been filed, 3 have been filed here in Rhode Island that we're co-leading on, and I'll take each one of them in turn. The first one came about very quickly. I think it might have been Sarah. Poor Sarah, we need to get her like 5 of her. I think it was you who spotted it on Blue Sky, right? The OMB memo, she's nodding. So Sarah spotted on Blue Sky, I saw it too. I know after Sarah did, but I saw it too. When I saw it, it was like a photograph of this memorandum for something called the Office of Management and Budget in the executive branch of the Trump administration. And what it said was that they were going to freeze effectively all federal funding until it could be reviewed for its consistency with the president's executive orders. And he had issued a number of them by that time, everything from immigration, etc. And so all of us, I think, had the same reaction, or most of us did. Well, he can't do that. You know, he can't freeze money already appropriated by the Congress. Now, he and the Congress down the road can decide how to spend the money. That's a subject for another day and an area of concern. But in terms of what's already been allocated, already obligated, it's like a contract, already appropriated. You can't change that. And so there were conversations internally among us in the office, myself and my team, including Sarah and others. There were conversations among the staffs, among the offices, and among the AGs. And ultimately, we decided that we needed to file a case, and we needed to file it fast. Because the states needed this money. For example, the night that memo came out, our state offices here, our Medicaid office, tried to draw down Medicaid funds to pay for health care coverage for Rhode Islanders covered by Medicaid. It's about a third of our population. We're told by the federal government they couldn't do it. They didn't know how long they weren't going to be able to do it, and they wouldn't put anything in writing, which is a bad sign. If what you're doing is lawful. So that, you know, at least as a former prosecutor, that got my attention. And so overnight, we had to draft a complaint and a motion for a temporary restraining order to get it on file the next day, you know, coordinating among, I think, 4 or 5 offices, deciding where to file it. I think it came down to New York and Rhode Island in the end. I felt strongly it shouldn't be filed in Washington. I think these cases are best filed out in the field, as we call it, out of the Beltway, where everyday Americans live, including in small states like ours. And so that work got done, and that case was on file the next afternoon, and we were in court. Was it the next day, Sarah, we were in court? We were in court the next day in front of Judge McConnell, and we got a TRO which stopped that freeze. Well, stopping that freeze was 1/3, as I said, of our state's budget. Everything for money for, as I mentioned, Medicare, health, other health care, infrastructure, law enforcement. My own Medicaid fraud unit would have been impacted by that. So any way that federal money impacts our state budget, money that comes into our state budget and then is allocated back out, that was threatened by this president here and around the country. So we're able to bring that to a halt. Really, we had filed a birthright citizenship case together in Massachusetts, and another one in Washington State that we also won. And that one we sought a nationwide injunction because we wanted every child who was born in the United States to be a citizen, not in some states but not others. Won those cases too. But that OMB case was the first case we filed here and very, very significant. The next case we filed, which was in the last week or so, was when the president's Department of Health and Human Services under Secretary of Kennedy abruptly halted public health funding for, in their mind, it had a connection to COVID-19, and the state's view, our view, was much broader than that. So everything from childhood vaccination to vaccination clinics to planning for the next pandemic. We sit here today in relative comfort with one another, but we all know that during COVID, first time around, a lot of people died, 1 million people across the country, more than 1 million, 800 million worldwide. I saw the monument on the Mall in Washington where children planted individual white flags for their family members, where you could sit down and read the message to the family members. At that time, the running count on the Washington Mall was over 600,000 people. Planning for the next pandemic. If we think another pandemic won't come and that COVID-19, was a once in a lifetime thing, I wouldn't want to take that bet. And I see some of you aren't taking it either out there, and you're smart not to. So that was $31 million in our state budget, which our state planners would have to, state leaders would have to find to do that work. It was $11 billion around the country. So we went to court here in Rhode Island and we stopped that as well. Sarah argued that too, didn't you, Sarah?
You did.
Yes, she did. So we had great success there in front of Judge McElroy. The president likes to talk about shock and awe. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will say, as a former U.S. attorney, I was really proud of of Sarah's argument and all of the work that all of the staffs did. And it goes beyond Sarah. And she'll be the first to tell you that, even in our own office, the collective work that went into the writings so that Judge McElroy would have what she needed to rule in our favor so quickly. So we halted that, $11 billion for public health around the country, including $31 million right here. So, there's some in Rhode Island that will say, well, Trump did us a favor by giving us the $220,000 for the bridge that President Biden had agreed to give us. So we followed through on that, and that's good. And no one's going to say that's a bad thing. Some might say, well, we should have had it nailed down before Trump took office, but he gave it to us. But he gave us $220,000 and then took back $220 million and then took back $31 million. And it won't be the last time the president tries to take money back from us. So it's more than just a shell game, but you have to look at it that way. So that's case number 2. And then case number 3, we filed late Friday afternoon. The president has tried to effectively eliminate 3 federal agencies. He's tried to eliminate more than 3, but the 3 that we were concerned about are agencies that play a significant role in our lives, but are not probably always top of mind. One is a federal agency that funds and assists local libraries. One is an agency that provides mediation services and labor disputes so that our workers will keep working and our industries will keep doing what they do. We won't go through all of the tumult that comes with a labor strike, which impacts all of us in one way or the other. And the last one was an agency that helps support minority businesses. And so what the president has effectively done there is get rid of all the employees. And so when you get rid of all the employees and terminate grants, well then there isn't any new grants coming down, or can't be because there's no one to do them. And then the grants that you have, again, runs headlong into what we believe is illegal, which is those are congressionally allocated funds. So the president can't stop them. But take the library funds, for example. The interlibrary loan service, children's education over the summer, programs for older Rhode Islanders who, like I hope to be, I'm already older, but I hope to spend more time in my local library when I'm not Attorney General anymore. Programs for all of us that are really important to the quality of our lives and the education of our children. So we brought that complaint on Friday afternoon. In fact, I was in federal court at an unveiling of a portrait of Judge Smith, who's taking senior status, and I was sitting next to the acting U.S. attorney, and she said to me, "You're not going to file anything and serve me with another complaint here, are you?" And I said, "Well," her name is Sarah too, actually. I said, "Well, Sarah, actually we are, but I don't know if we filed it yet. Let me check my email." And I said, "Well, it's coming in 10 minutes. So I ruined her Friday afternoon. So that complaint is filed. I think we'll have an argument on that in the early part of the week. I expect that we'll be successful there as well. We've had to go back to court. Someone asked me why these court orders aren't being enforced. In fact, they are. I would describe on the funding case, the first case, the federal government's response has been one of passive aggressiveness. So they say they've turned it on, and then when you try to get the money, you find that you can't. So we've had to go back a couple of times. Most recently about FEMA funding. Particularly that's a big deal in Hawaii, as you remember the Maui fires, as well as in California, but it also impacts money right here at home in Rhode Island. And so Judge McConnell granted our motion to enforce, and that came down on Friday. The court issued a TRO in the second case yesterday, and I believe that FEMA, or the federal government, has 48 hours to come back to Judge McConnell and tell him that they've complied. But the approach there is to put ourselves in a better position if we have to seek contempt against the administration. That is a major step. And on appeal, we want to make sure that we have been more than reasonable by trying to bring the federal government to heel here. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but the office and our AG staffs have done a lot of work over the last, I think, 74, 75 days of Trumpism.
I think they showed up for the long answer, so I think we're good. I think folks showed up for the extended edition. Third question. As Tip O'Neill and many others have commented over the years, all politics is local. Given this reality, can you talk about how the state budget that is in process affects your work as Attorney General?
Yeah, this is not a subject that some might say otherwise, but I don't love talking about it. But the reality is that the governor and I don't have a very good relationship. And I would point to the fact that the office has effectively, we've done our jobs, which is to investigate his administration at least 3 times and then issue reports about it so that you can make your own judgments as to whether or not what we concluded was correct or not. So all of those investigations are up on our website. It's all there for you to read. Well, the governor has taken offense to that. And as a result, for the last several years now, he has not been sympathetic to my requests to add staff to my office to do the kind of work that mostly Sarah has led. So everything from environmental protection and healthcare, God knows, we have done a lot of work around Roger Williams and Fatima hospitals to good end over the last several years. So healthcare, consumer protection, civil rights. So, I've nevertheless been able to add those people because when we brought the opioid cases against the opioid manufacturers, distributors, and pharmacies, in addition to around $300 million that we brought back for substance abuse prevention and treatment, We were also granted, because our lawyers did a lot of work on those cases, our in-house lawyers, about $15 million in legal fees that we could use to support our own work. And so I reached an agreement with the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, with whom I have a great relationship, that we could hire back then 10 additional lawyers, as long as I paid for them out of that pot of money, and we did. And those lawyers come to work every day, working for you for really. You're not paying for it out of your taxpayer dollars. They're being paid for out of monies we've recovered, and that we add to that fund. Do I think that's the way we should run our office? I think there are reasons not to do that. But as some would say, any port in a storm, and if the work needs to get done and I can't do it, then I'm going to figure out a way to do it, because I am your lawyer and I feel it's important for us to get the work done. So, as you've heard, there's a lot of work. And Sarah would like to see me succeed in getting more people into the office for no other reason, so she can spend more time with her wonderful children and her husband. And I do worry about burnout on the part of my staff. We're a really small office. You know, we have only 30 civil attorneys and about 70 prosecutors, and you know, every one of those lawyers is working really hard. So to make a very long story short, this time around, I asked the governor to put in his budget additional positions so that we could build out the office, because Sarah doesn't just do this work, she and her team do all kinds of other stuff that's also really important. The governor, once again, did not call us back, shall we say. But again, I'm confident this year that both the Senate and the House understand the need for us to be stronger in terms of personnel. We have a lot of outstanding lawyers that want to join us to do this work. We just hired a really strong healthcare lawyer from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. The President had put him on administrative leave along with a lot of his colleagues. He wanted to work, not just get paid, and so he could have got paid, I think, through August. Instead, he decided to join us in April. That's the kind of person and lawyer, those are the kinds of people of character that I can bring on, as long as I have the budget width to do that. So what we're going to do this time around is, again, we're going to tap into that legal fee fund to pay these people. They will come on and work for you. It's not totally a done deal yet, but I'm confident the Speaker and the Senate President, the House Finance and Senate Finance chairs and their committees will allow us to do that, and that will allow us to continue to do the work, notwithstanding the governor's unwillingness to support it. I do think the governor could have stood with me, and we could have jointly done this work, but he chose otherwise. But it's not impacting what we're doing, as you can see. We've already brought 3 cases in Rhode Island. There'll be more. We've been successful. We'll continue to be successful. We're working hard. We really believe in the work. We know how important it is to save our democracy for our children and grandchildren. And so in the big picture, we're going to be just fine.
I have a lightning round question before the Q&A. Are you ready? You ready?
You name it.
So the times are pretty sporty right now, as you know in your work, and if you just look out onto the American landscape currently. And perhaps this is a question that is in the room, and so I'll just jump the line and ask it first. What should Rhode Islanders be doing in this moment, Mr. Attorney General? What should we be doing? We, especially those of us who believe in the rule of law and such, what should we as an electorate, as a population, as citizens, as neighbors, as a community, what should Rhode Islanders be doing?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest question I get. And I'll tell you why. See, I'm sure that my wife's sitting out there, my son is out there too, and they work really hard. They're both doctors, and I love and I'm proud of both of them. But they go to work every day and they see their patients. Zach's in the hospital most of the time in Chicago. And, but they come home and they're as frustrated as all of you are. I get to go to work and sue Trump. And it feels really good. It feels good for you, Sarah? So I get it. I get it, because Shelley will come to me and say, oh my God, what happened today? I'm so frustrated, I can't believe what he's doing. And like, I really don't want to talk about it because I've been living it all day. But I do get it, and I don't have an easy answer to it, because I know how powerless it must feel as you watch what's going on around you, and you want to contribute, you're anxious, and we're a long way from the next midterms, let alone the next presidential. I read an interesting editorial today, I think it was in the Globe, and it said, well, if you'd only remained part of Britain, they'd be calling for new elections as a system of parliament, right? And, if the government loses faith, people lose faith in the government, you got to call an election, right? If only. And God, we didn't feel that way a few years ago, did we? The 4th of July will never feel quite the same. It will again. So I get it. So here's a lot of people have raised this with me in East Providence, in Barrington, as I've sort of gone around and had sessions like this. And I think, like yesterday, I thought was really inspiring. For those of you who got out or supported or said something on social media about people all over this country, in small towns, in small cities and big cities, getting out there and letting the administration know that those of us who view the world the way we view it aren't going to go away quietly. That we believe in the rule of law, that we believe in our democratic values, that we believe that the majority doesn't rule, that our system of government is set up to protect the views of the minority, of which currently, at least for the moment, we are. So getting out and expressing yourself, whether it be in that setting, or when you're with friends, or even when I think some of us feel afraid, right? Like that person next to me, if I say, Jesus, Trump's driving me crazy today, they're going to be one of those folks and they won't like it. Well, look, I don't think that those folks are bad people. I don't. They're Americans just like us. And we can agree to disagree, to your point, in a way that is respectful. But I think it can be cathartic just to tell the person you may not know sitting next to you, or even your group of friends, how you're feeling. I will tell you, I'm not asking you to write letters to me, so please don't. But the ones that we get, and I get a handful every week, they mean something. I mean, my staff loves to open and read them. My assistants love reading them. I'm sure that, if some of you know Sarah, some of you know my folks. They're from all over Rhode Island. If you see them and thank them, that will mean a lot. I know you're going to vote, so I don't really need to tell you to do that. Letters to the editor, I think it's great. I think when I was U.S. Attorney, and I think maybe this analogy works here. When I first became U.S. Attorney in the Obama administration, went to Washington for my orientation. It was about 2009. And they told us, we're Democrats and, or appointed by Democratic administrations, and, like going out of Washington for you was a big deal. I worked in the Justice Department for a long time, but like going out of Washington, going to the main Justice Building, like that was a big deal to me. I was I don't want to say I was intimidated, but I had a healthy respect for it. And they told us, with Democratic U.S. attorneys, we've got to remind you that you're the U.S. attorney. And with the Republican U.S. attorneys, because this is the executive staff that deals with all kinds of administrations, with the Republican U.S. attorneys, we've got to remind them that they're only the U.S. attorney. And so I guess what I'm saying is, I think for those of us who see the world that we do, not that we're monolithic, that sometimes we worry about being as expressive as maybe the other folks are. And I think we should just express what we think to one another, to people we run into. If you can use the written word and you like writing to your local newspaper or the Journal or the Globe, when the midterms do come up, write letters to support candidates that look at the world the way you do. Get involved in local politics. A lot of these same battles are playing out here around rights of transgender students right here in our local communities. For example, just one example, I mean, what's going on? Why are libraries? Why is the president targeting libraries? Because he wants to decide, among other things, what people can read in them. So if you get involved in local politics, you can, or support local politicians who see the world the way you do, you can move the needle there too. But ultimately, you have to find your way that brings you hope and satisfaction. Here's where I find hope. I find hope in the staffs in our collective offices. We built the biggest and best law firm in the country. When I was in Los Angeles for a AG conference, you know, the 23 of us went into a room. We were talking about all kinds of things. I mean, you know, all of us have egos, and I'm from a small state. You should see an AG from a big state. You know, it's herding cats. And I remember after 2 hours, we finished whatever we were doing. I walked out and I said to some people outside, the white smoke is going to go up, you know. We finally made a decision, okay? But when I went back into the ballroom to get my stuff where I left it, there were 20 or so assistant attorneys general like Sarah sitting around a table. Keith Hoffman from my office was with me on that trip. And they were talking to a whole bunch of others by video, including some of my own staff back home. And I took hope from that. You know, these are lawyers that will fight for you. It's not a 9-to-5 job for them. They're working really hard, weekends, nights, because they care every bit as much as you do. And so if you know that they're fighting for you every day, and we're not gonna stop, and we're ready, and we're gonna get it done because that's just what we do, know that we're doing our part. Take some hope from that. I do. I take some inspiration from that. Keeps me going. And then find your ways to support that and other work. And in the end, we'll come out on the other side. You know, I was on an email string with my fellow former U.S. attorneys, and if you can believe it, there's an association of former U.S. attorneys, and one of the things that has been a big subject of debate is supporting the men and women in the Department of Justice who are career prosecutors and are now facing an administration led by Pam Bondi, where one of the first things they're told is, you can't use paper straws anymore, okay? That, literally, I'm not joking. They got a memo, no more paper straws, okay? This is where the priorities are. You know, there are lawyers being fired in the Department of Justice, and you can't fire career lawyers. The administration doesn't care. They have civil service protection. There's a whole process by which you can remove a assistant U.S. attorney. The Trump administration is just firing them. There's a guy they promoted. He went over to court within the last couple of days, actually acknowledged to the court, I believe Maryland or DC, that yes, the administration had deported somebody, El Salvador, who didn't deserve to be deported, acknowledged that fact, and the Trump administration put him on administrative leave that afternoon. So, you know, but you know, the former U.S. attorneys, we can't agree on whether we should put out a statement or not supporting those assistant U.S. attorneys. And so even among my friends, my Obama friends, there's been a lot of back and forth today. But what I said to them, because they're all dear friends of mine, is, and my message to everyone is we're gonna get through it. As long as we don't get complacent, as long as we don't lose hope, as long as we don't lose fight. And as long as we're, to your first question, as long as we're not silent. You know, in my view, you can't negotiate with Trump, you can't reason with him. You have to fight him. And as long as we go into this with that mindset, we'll come out on the other side. I'm confident of it.
Mr. Attorney General, simple question. For many of us, it's not beyond imagination to think that the DOJ itself overall and the FBI in particular may be compromised into a loyalist organization. And should we reach that point in our country, and should we also reach the point where the current regime decides to defy court orders, what would you recommend that Rhode Islanders be thinking about as alternatives and ways of pushing back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are really two parts to that question. The first one is, do I think the Department of Justice will become a loyalist organization? administration and the FBI have less of an insight into. Although I worked with a lot of FBI agents over the years, and my friend Eric Yankee, who works for me now, was with ATF, and I knew those guys really well. Frankly, they tend to bend conservative, but they don't bend against the rule of law. And I think that if they are asked, I think that most federal agents, if they are asked to do something that is blatantly unlawful, like, for example, engage in warrantless arrests or warrantless searches, I don't believe the majority of them will do it. I don't believe the majority of DOJ prosecutors will help them do it. Certainly, federally, to get a warrant at all, a written warrant, you have to go to the court. It's unlike in the state system where the police can draw it up on their own. Federally, and Eric and I used to do this. We used to go over and see the magistrate judge, and we had to have facts, and we had to have probable cause. If we didn't have it, we didn't get the warrant. So the only way they could do it is by doing warrantless searches and seizures and warrantless arrests. And I think that would be a bridge too far for the administration. Will they? Certainly. Will they walk to the edge and beyond of what is right? Yes. As an administration, no question about it. But I don't expect to see the worst because of the men and women who have worked there and are career employees. The second part of the question is what happens, as I understood it, is what happens when the administration ignores court orders. And I think that they're on the precipice of that. I believe that they're doing it in a passive-aggressive way, but not an open way at the district court level. So there's the federal district courts, which is the lowest level. Then there's the appellate courts, which is the next level. So ours is in Boston, for example, and then there's the Supreme Court. I think they're being passive-aggressive because they know that flatly saying, I'm not going to follow Judge McConnell's order, I don't care what he says, would be a bridge too far for many Americans, even ones that have supported the president in the past. But I think this is the creeping authoritarianism that I worry about, which is the notion that, well, we'll impeach them, or they should be impeached, or they're corrupt. That worries me. But to play your scenario all the way out, sir, where the Supreme Court disagrees with the administration, on birthright citizenship, clear case, where they should, I don't know that they will, but we should win that case. I think we should win the funding cases. Those are clear cut. Were the president to ignore them, I mean, the only other president in history, to my knowledge, that has openly ignored a Supreme Court directive is Andrew Jackson, and which led to the Trail of Tears. That was a long time ago. Horrible, but a long time ago. I mean, I think at that point, Americans are in the street, and not to the tune of 10,000 in Providence. I think it's 50,000 in Providence, and 2 million in New York, and a nationwide labor strike. I mean, I think our friends in labor, at that point, have to be energized for a nationwide strike, or things of that nature, because we simply, as Americans, can't accept the president overturning what Chief Justice John Marshall decided in 1803, that the Supreme Court, whether we like it or not, has the final word on what the law is. And there were lots of times I didn't like it. I didn't like it in Dobbs, but I accepted it. I didn't like it in Bruin, but I accepted it. I didn't like it in Bush v. Gore, but we accepted it because it was the Supreme Court, and we accepted it. And this time, when the president, if he doesn't accept it, then he has broken with the rule of law in our Constitution. And then at that point, I think for us, everything is on the table. Any way that we can push back as Americans will be necessary. And I don't think that the majority of Americans and more won't agree with that view. I really do. I could be surprised, but I think that the majority of Americans, for more than the majority, that'll be a bridge too far.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is unrelated about Anchor Medical Associates and what's happening with our healthcare system. And why is it that Rhode Island's reimbursement rates are so much lower than our surrounding states? That's my first question. My second is about the governor. And I wrote to him and said that I wanted him to work with you. But I didn't have any specifics about what to ask him for, other than threatening him about the next election. So can you please give us some ideas?
Well, if threatening him about the next election doesn't move him, nothing will. So I'll start with the healthcare question, which is a really hard one to answer. It's not hard to answer, but it's hard to see a solution unless we really change what we're doing dramatically. So Anchor Medical is for those of you who don't know, is a really excellent primary care and pediatrics practice that serves about 25,000 patients in Rhode Island. They're located, as I remember it, in Lincoln, Warwick, and Providence. And they're closing. They put an ad in the Pro-Joe yesterday, pursuant to state healthcare regulations. They're winding down, and they will stop seeing patients in 90 days. And so that's 25,000 patients, including children, that won't have a doctor. And I know, if I asked you for a show of hands, how many of you have had a hard time finding a primary care doctor, a lot of hands would go up. And my wife has to take my son to the airport, so that's good for her, because some of you might corner her at the door. But you know, she hasn't taken a new patient in a long time. And it used to be I could ask her to take a friend here and there, you know, and she'd be okay with it. Now I'm afraid to even ask her because the response I get is not a friendly one. It's a really serious problem. And it goes beyond primary care. Our healthcare systems, there's a reason why Roger Williams and Fatima Hospital went into bankruptcy. You know, we were fortunate, we were able to squeeze the office. Sarah and her cohorts were able to squeeze $50 million out of the private equity firm that once owned them to give that pot of money to them. It's kind of a start for them. They don't have an endowment like, say, South County Hospital does. But that's all a function of two things, and you alluded to them. There are two things that drive an insufficient amount of revenue into our healthcare systems for both providers, especially primary care providers, and hospital systems. And that's this. First of all, we have a high number of people on Medicaid because our economy isn't where it should be. And so if our economy was better, we'd have more people on commercial insurance. But as a result, because our economy isn't where it should be, we have a lot of people who are working men and women, but they are on Medicaid. So this notion that, you know, if you're getting Medicaid, you're not working, that's not true. There are a lot of people that are on Medicaid that are working really hard, but that's the only place they can get insurance because, you know, the little clothing store they work in doesn't provide insurance for the men and women who sell clothes and that, so they got to buy it on their own. And so we have a high Medicaid population. We're also older, so we have a lot of Rhode Islanders who are on Medicare. And so if we were to put on a chart, and Sarah has some really good charts. Don't you wish you brought your chart, Sarah? Sarah has really good charts. But if I were to draw, like, commercial insurance reimburses on a sliding scale. They're over here. They reimburse the most for the same thing. Okay? They give more money back to the provider or the system for the same work than Medicare, which is here, and Medicaid, which is over here. Okay? So if you have a lot of Medicaid patients rather than commercial patients, everything that you do, you're getting less money into the pot. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is for each of those three buckets, it's less in Rhode Island than it is in other states, like Connecticut and Massachusetts. So Medicare reimbursement rates are higher in Connecticut and Massachusetts than Rhode Island. Same thing for Medicaid, and same thing for commercial, okay? So when you put those two things together, we have a lot of Medicaid patients, a lot of Medicare patients. So already we got less commercial, And then the rates for all three are lower than our neighboring states. What that means is that the revenue coming into the system is lower than it is in those states. So ask yourselves this. This is how you know what I just said is true. Lifespan, now Brown Health, bought 2 hospitals that were struggling, community hospitals. Where were they located? Can anybody tell me? Massachusetts, bingo. There were 2 community hospitals right here in Rhode Island that were struggling, Roger Williams and Fatima. They had no interest in those. Why? Because a Massachusetts patient is worth more than a Rhode Island patient, right? So by buying hospitals over there and getting revenue there, they can balance out. Bye guys, they're going to the airport. See you, thanks for coming. They're the best. Love you. By spreading out where their revenue's coming from, they make more money. Okay, they can balance out what they're not making around. Smart, it's really smart. So how do we fix it? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge it's a problem. And we can't fix the primary care shortage by building a medical school at URI. As the head of Anchor Medical said to me, and I thought this was great, he said, that's telling the patient, have a seat in the waiting room, the inexperienced doctor will be with you in a decade. Okay? That's not going to solve the problem. You know, the governor talked about $400,000 for loan forgiveness. Like, I have a son who went to med school. Like, that's like 2 doctors. Like, that's not going to solve our primary care shortage when Anchor had 26 to 30 providers, like, that are going to be in the wind if they don't stay in Rhode Island. And frankly, if you go across state lines and make 30% more, why wouldn't you, right? I don't know why they're coming here. They couldn't recruit doctors. Surprise, those doctors get paid more if they live in Stonington or live over in Westport. So why would they come here? So we're all going to be heading, if we don't get this thing fixed, we're all going to be heading into our neighboring states to get our health care. And kind of that's already happening. Like, my urologist is in Westerly. If I need something done, I'm going to Yale, New Haven, right? So that's where we're headed with healthcare unless we fix it. Now, we can fix it. We can fix it. But healthcare is hard, and not everybody understands it, and our leaders don't understand it the way they should, or don't spend the time on it the way they should. Now, I'll give the Senate President, the Speaker, something of a pass, because they're not full-time people. But I don't give the executive branch, the governor, and that team a pass, because they're not doing enough, and they're not moving fast enough. We're doing too much planning and not enough doing. So what does doing look like? And the office is trying to come up with some practical solutions. Among them is, you know, we have to spend more in Medicaid to get more money from the federal government. Now, that was before Trump took office, so that's more of a wild card. But if you're not even going to try that the way our neighboring states are, it's $3 for every $1, I think. Is that what it is, Sarah? Or is it 2?
2 for 1.
It's 2 for 1. So for every dollar we spend, it's $2 we get back from the federal government. So yeah, we got to put more Medicaid money out of our state budget into the system, but $2 comes back, right? So you think about that, more revenue into the system. That's just one example. We think that we have a proposal to streamline our state healthcare agencies, because they're all scattered around state government. And if we streamline that, we can come up with better data and better planning. One of the challenges, we're trying to do more strategic thinking in the office when we have time. We had more time until a year ago, or whenever Trump took office, but one of our challenges, we just don't have access to the data we need the way they do in Massachusetts. So we can build a comprehensive plan quickly to take on this healthcare problem and deal with it, but we just don't have that level of imagination in our government. How can you help me? I'm gonna be fine. So don't worry, that's why I was a little reluctant to talk about it. I talk about it at the State House because I'm talking to the budget leaders, and so the press picks that up and they run with it. But I'm going to get the positions I need. I'll pay for them myself. I've got the money to do that, so I'm going to have the people to work on it. But it is disappointing to me that the governor, frankly, would prioritize his personal animus over what's best for Rhode Islanders. But frankly, that's consistent with who he is. And I don't say that lightly, but I've seen enough over my career that it's pretty plain to me that that's what that's about. But we'll be fine. I appreciate the sentiment. I love the fact that you sent the letter, so thank you. But we're going to be just fine on that score. A lot of work to do around healthcare. I have a great healthcare team now. They're really, really strong. Much better than when I started. All right, fine. I'll hold on to it. Anyone else out there?
Yeah.
Oh, sir, hi.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for being here.
Sure.
So my question is, can the present administration simply terminate federal contractors' contracts, which is happening to me, and I suspect other Rhode Island federal contractors at this time?
Yeah, so my general answer to that is no. One of the things that we have tried to do is represent as many Rhode Islanders as possible. So what do I mean by that? So when we bring lawsuits, if you've listened to what I've been saying, and I know you have, one of the things that may not have come through as clearly as I should have made it is that we can sue on behalf of all of you collectively. Something that in fact impacts all of you the same way. Birthright citizenship, public health funding, the federal portion of our state budget. We tried, in our case, the first case we brought, to bring, for example, nonprofits who had obligated funds, but did not get their money through the state, so there were three pots of money there. Money that came right to the state directly, and the state used it. Money that came to nonprofits through the state, meaning that it came to the state sent it back out again, and then monies that came directly to nonprofits. Judge McConnell, as we read his order, did not include nonprofits in his order. And so nonprofits brought their own case some days later, because we can't sue on behalf of an individual nonprofit. And I'm blanking on one. Bushy Brook comes to mind, but that may mean nothing to you. Case from a long time ago. So when it comes to your situation, if you're a federal contractor, I can't give you legal advice. That's my legal disclaimer for the Board of Bar Overseers, or whatever we call it here in Rhode Island. But I will tell you that a contract, in my view, is a contract. And if you, we have a network of lawyers that are helping Rhode Islanders that aren't in the office, but that we know that have approached us and say, hey, look, we're willing to do pro bono work. And we can connect you to one of those lawyers this week. Blake Collins is my chief of staff, and he's also does a great job for us. And he's a fellow right behind Sarah down here, and you guys can connect and go from there.
I have a million questions, but I'm going to try to only do one, and that is, in terms of, you mentioned FEMA, and many of us don't know all the idiosyncrasies of that case and the impact on the past versus the future. And we have this week been projected to have a very active hurricane season, which of course could affect everyone in this room and the entire state or parts of it. So are we protected, or are we preparing to move quick, and how secure can we feel in the event we take a hit?
Yeah, so when I talked about future funding, what I meant was this. Our view is that anything that Congress has already appropriated, meaning it's come up in past budgets. So for example, take the public health funding. That was allocated to the states 3 years ago. And so the state kind of draws it down. The way federal money works is they don't just give it to you in a big account and then never contact you again. They like to kind of have you take it down, file a report, let them know what you did with it, make sure you didn't misspend it, that kind of thing. So sometimes these funds are kind of stacked up for years. So anything that the Congress has already said you're going to get, our view is Trump can't change it without going back to Congress. Now we can go back to Congress through what's called a rescission action, but he hasn't chosen to do that. It may be difficult to do that for all I know. It hasn't happened all that often as far as I know. Anyway, he hasn't done it. Another example of him just not caring what Congress says. So I don't know enough about FEMA funding to be able to tell you how much FEMA funding we have for out years, meaning going forward. But the real issue for us, all of us, is in the coming congressional budgets, if the new Congress, the Republican-controlled Congress, just decides we're going to cut all FEMA funding across the country by 75%, there's very little we're going to be able to do about that. That's not something we can solve in the courtroom. We have to solve that at the ballot box.
But do they have the ability to not declare a federal disaster area out of vengeance or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to get it. So put that on your list over there, folks. We're going to get the answer to that. I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good question. The question was, can the federal government, let's say, hurricane, the 1938 hurricane came through here again, and, had the same amount of damage that we had back then, more, because there's more of us and there's more coastal infrastructure. Could the federal government not declare a federal, a disaster, and by doing so, not allow us to draw down the money? I'm pretty sure we'd go to court on that. I don't know if we'd win. But we'd figure out a way to go to court on that. So we'd be in court. That I can promise you. I need more. I have to think about more with the team to know what our odds of winning. But I have to believe there's some regulations about when the government can declare those. So that's interesting. I love being a lawyer. But it has real impacts, as you point out, for sure. Somebody else out there had a question?
Yes, hi.
Oh, hi.
There's an article in Yahoo about Social Security and how we might be asked to verify our identity if we're receiving benefits.
Yep.
And our accounts might be transferred from our current online accounts to something called login.gov. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, we are following very closely the new requirements involving Social Security. And I've asked the team to take a very close look at that. And I imagine, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if a lawsuit comes, and I think the odds of that are pretty high, I want to file it here because Social Security really matters to me. Both of my parents are effectively living on it. And I know what that means, when you're 96 years old and 89 years old, like my parents are. And they love to work. My dad was a bus monitor into his 90s before COVID. And, and he was quick too, because I'd be behind the bus. And they're like, he was moving really well. It wasn't like he was holding us up. Everyone hates me behind the school bus. But he was quick. But no, we're following that very closely. And to the extent we need to litigate anything involving Social Security, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it here. I do think my parents don't have access to a computer, for example. So by making Social Security recipients do things that that are difficult for them. Not many, my parents are still mobile, believe it or not, but I'm really concerned about it. And although my joking notwithstanding, and if anything needs to be done there, rest assured we're going to do it. I recognize that what a lot of this is true voting too, by making things more difficult, they are trying to impact some group of Americans that it's, for whatever reason, they have targeted in some way, or states that they're targeting. And just because you're on the Social Security rolls, for example, doesn't mean you're getting Social Security. So this whole thing about 150-year-old people or something was pretty thoroughly debunked. Am I keeping? What are we doing? Then we got more. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Following up on the first question, your answer was if the administration doesn't follow a court order, we take to the streets and hopefully the workers strike. Is there not a government agency that the courts can call on to enforce a court order?
No, that's what Judge McConnell said that, and I hope I didn't sound flip when I said it. I said, I just don't, that's an unprecedented time in American history. And I think it's a time at which we would all have to do things that we probably have never contemplated. And look, I found that as a lawyer, I'm reasonably imaginative. I like to think maybe sometimes more imaginative than my staff likes, because I come up with all kinds of crazy theories that they have to debunk because I want to do something. But I have no doubt that people in this room would come up with creative ways to let the country know that that was a bridge too far. But as Judge McConnell said when he was handling either emotion with force or maybe it was the main part of the case, another part of the case, he said, look, I don't have an army outside to enforce my orders. He doesn't even have the marshals. I mean, the marshals that protect the court, I mean, they protect the judges. They are a function of the executive branch, the marshals appointed by the president. So no, there is no military or police force that the courts can call on to enforce their judgments. That's why it's been so important over the course of our history that we have accepted what John Marshall said in 1803, that the last word on what the law is the court, not the president. That's what our system of government is. When the president gets to that point, we're no longer a democracy. We are an authoritarian system of government. And Americans at that point will have to decide in that moment how we're not going to let that happen. And I think collectively we'll figure that out. I hope we never get there, but we'll figure it out. But it's not wrong to be thinking about it. It's not wrong to be scared. It's not wrong to be dismayed. Because we talk about that too amongst ourselves as AGs. And sometimes we're scared and dismayed. There are no easy answers to that one because it literally is unprecedented in our history. You know, would the Congress impeach? Yeah, if they had the numbers. They should. But would they have the numbers and would they? I mean, that's, you know, the unwillingness of Republicans here to push back when they're sidelined themselves in the Congress is really remarkable. You know, the only person I've seen any sign of life out is Noah Hawley, who I have to say I have very little respect for otherwise. But he's actually voted with a couple of other, with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. They weren't the majority, but he actually voted with them. And he had some problem with something else the administration was doing. You know, maybe that will begin to sort of trickle out as more of this comes down the pike. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Who's next?
Hi, first I do want to say thank you.
Oh, hi, thank you.
So, thank you for being here and the work that you've done. Definitely want to say thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge Michael Morris and his Substack that the leaders of the New Revolution were involved in the hands-off protests. And I want to acknowledge that there are some heroes here tonight or today that I believe are also leaders, and I believe, you know, locally as well, that we will be standing up, and some that are joining on the stage and some that I see around, and I'm grateful for that. Apologize, we were a little late, so you may have spoken to this, but my concern is around the stuff we're seeing around immigration and what rights are being, like what's happening right now, and what is Rhode Island's response to that, because where some of the questions had gone around authoritarianism and tyranny, with people not being held with given due process, there's that question about U.S. citizens, you know, also being disappeared. And what really shocked me was seeing it happen in like in New England, where we are sanctuary cities. And so, could you speak a little to that and what we're prepared to do? And thank you.
Yeah. So there are a couple of aspects to that. So first and foremost, what I find frustrating in my seat is, as I mentioned earlier, we can't represent an individual. So if ICE picks up somebody at the courthouse, for example, we can't go to court to do anything about that. I know my colleague in Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell, very concerned about what happened to not only the brown doctor who got turned around at the airport, but the tough student. But one of the things we've talked about, you know, she reached out to me about the brown doctor, and that was really early on before some of the other information started to come out, which I think made it a much harder case for the doctor, frankly. But you know, what's our, you know, we always ask ourselves three things. You know, is what the Trump administration, is what he's doing or the administration doing unlawful? Is it harming Rhode Islanders? Those are questions 1 and 2. Question 3 is, do we have standing? And standing is, for those of you who aren't lawyers, is are we able to go to court on behalf of that person? okay? And that sounds, it can be mind-numbing, particularly if you are like me and I want to go, but we don't have standing and the staff has to, sort of, bind me in. Sometimes I don't even view myself as a lawyer so much anymore. It's been a long time since I've been in a courtroom arguing myself. So there's that. But there are areas where we will be able to act. So what we see coming is, I mentioned it earlier, is you only, for example, you only get law enforcement grants if you cooperate, as the administration defines it, with our immigration enforcement efforts. So what does that look like as a practical matter? That means the Fusion Center, which protects us from domestic and foreign threats, run by the state police, funded by the federal government, doesn't get the funding it needs to exist. That's been around since 9/11, unless state troopers are sworn in to do immigration work. I can see that fight coming. I don't believe, and the staff hasn't worked it up for me yet, so I'm not holding any of my staff to this, but I don't believe that that's lawful. I believe the states have the right to determine what their policies are going to be and how they're going to express their powers. And the federal government can't direct us to do something that the Constitution or the laws of this country require us to do. In fact, there's an amendment, I think it's the 10th, I'm pretty confident it is, that reserves powers to the states that are reserved by the federal government. So there's a fight that's going to play out itself in immigration and law enforcement. And there are going to be other similar fights about conditional funding, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're going to see that. I'm not going to get federal funding unless I, get rid of my Clifton clerkship program, which provides legal scholarships to second-year law schools, mostly of black and brown backgrounds, because they don't often find their way into my office. It was a way for me to recruit more diverse candidates as lawyers, because we find many times that interns in our offices come back and apply to be permanent lawyers or full-time lawyers. We weren't getting those candidates because they didn't have any knowledge of the office and we didn't know them. Well, I'm not going to get rid of that because the Trump administration tells me I won't get federal funding for my Medicaid fraud unit, which is 75% federally funded. So that's going to be a lawsuit. So we're going to be pushing back in those areas, which will affect Rhode Island, writ large. I mean, ICE has so many agents in Rhode Island. When I was U.S. attorney, I could ask Eric, how many ICE agents would you say were in Rhode Island back then? 30? Yeah, maybe 30. Okay, I mean, ATF, we have maybe 20? 10 ATF agents. So it's not like, even if they grab the ATF agents, it's not like they're going to be able to swarm Rhode Island. But you had 300 troopers into the mix? What if Karen Pinch were here? She would tell you, she's a Richmond town administrator and was a former lieutenant colonel. Put 300 troopers on the road with 280, what they call 287 immigration authority. That's a very different way of doing business than how we're doing it right now. So those immigration fights are coming and we'll be ready for them. We're already looking at those.
Thank you. I've been reading that from day one, Trump had set up the possibility of martial law within 90 days. And I believe it had to do with the border security. And if he does declare martial law, what does that actually mean? Would that be just for the border? Would that be for the whole country? Would that mean we can't protest?
Well, I suppose it could mean all of those things, but we would be in court very quickly on that, and I'm confident that that would not withstand judicial scrutiny. I mean, there is this. I don't want to understate it because people are being picked up by ICE, for example. So I don't want to say that they're not out there because they are. And look, I work with federal agents like Eric and the FBI, excellent agents. They were our police force when I was a federal prosecutor before I became U.S. attorney. They're excellent, really excellent. But there aren't that many of them. There's way more of us than there are of them. I mean, they are not a frontline police force the way the South Kingstown Police Department is. And so I'm not sure who would enforce martial law. Like I have 110 lawyers The U.S. Attorney's Office has like 20.
Isn't the military?
Yeah, I just, well, the National Guard would have to be nationalized, and I just don't see it happening. I don't. I really don't. And even the military, it's a volunteer military that's what, 1 million strong? It's like 280 million people in this country. I just don't think, you saw what happened in Korea when the Korean president tried to declare martial law. Like, that thing was over in a hot minute, right? People got out in the street, and that was it. And the military, I just reading about it today. The military was not going to take on the citizens of the country. So when I talk about being in the streets, I guess maybe that's what I mean. It's like, do we really think that the National Guardsman from Warwick is going to aim a gun at us? I don't think that's going to happen because Donald Trump asked him to do it. I think that's the tipping point if we ever get there. My sense is we won't. But I understand why nothing, the way the administration has gone, I understand why any of us might think that anything is possible. But that's not on my checklist of things that I'm worried about. I'm not there yet.
Hi, Attorney General. My name is Jocelyn Foy.
Oh, hi.
I'm the Executive Director to the Woman Project, and a lot of folks here I work in collaboration with. We've all done so great. So I'm gonna just hit another big topic for you, maybe to end it for you. But Woman Project and a lot of folks passed legislation that protected the right to abortion in Rhode Island in 2019, and then we made that right real for Medicaid recipients and state workers in 2023. But if a national abortion ban were to come, like Rhode Island's one of only a few states that's really well protected, can you give us a really quick lesson of understanding a behavior of if a national abortion ban comes, how does that affect states that have codified it into law? And what kind of protections do we have in place to act on our right to health care in that instance?
Yeah, my initial, I would have asked Sarah to help me here, but not yet, Sarah. I would take a stab at it, and then they'll be able to judge whether I have any clue what I'm talking about. So, certainly if that happened, we would do everything we could to ensure that the right of Rhode Island women to make choices about their reproductive freedoms and rights would remain theirs. That said, I worry that a national abortion ban under the Supremacy Clause would take precedence over our state statute. But I don't know, and so I'm going to, for sure, so I'm going to ask Sarah. Sarah?
I think there's a scenario in which it would. I think we would try to come up with every.
I do unfortunately think that there is a scenario in which that would be the case where it would be preempted, but I think that there are many things that we could try to do before that or to argue that it was not. But it would have to be a national abortion ban that was passed by Congress and enacted, and it couldn't be something that came through executive order, for example, or any kind of restriction on funding or other mechanism that was purely executive.
So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we'll try it again.
Hi, Sarah. How do you do? Nice to meet you. Thank you for all your work and for having me with you Sunday. So I think that the question really becomes like a lot of us don't know the law the way you all do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the question from a more grassroots level of we're told that it's not available from a national ban. And so then what does a hospital administrator then have to do that's providing that care? They have to stop by legal means, or is that preemptive itself? Can we as a general public say to our friends, no, the care is still available until the corporations choose to stop?
No. So under the worst case scenario, because I think that's what the fear is, right? So what the Supremacy Clause, she said preemption, which is even more confusing than the Supremacy Clause. So I'll give you a little credit. What the Supremacy Clause says is that when there's this federal statute and a state statute that come into conflict, that under the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, federal law governs. Preemption is, I think at least, another way of saying the same thing, which is federal law preempts the states from legislating in that particular space. So what that would mean, a national abortion ban would mean that no one can get an abortion anywhere in the country. Now, would we try to fight back? Yes. How? We would try to fight back by saying, look, federal law does not preclude Rhode Islanders from collectively deciding through their General Assembly or their Constitution to do something else. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that that's an easy fight. Just the opposite. Just the opposite. You know, I'm sorry, say that again?
We know that fight well.
Yes, I know. Right. So it'd be very difficult. So obviously, you know, a national abortion ban would be something that we would all want to fight very hard against, because that would put us in a very difficult position here. But Sarah's point too, I think, is worth remembering that that would have to pass both houses of Congress. Look, we're not in a good place with the Congress right now, no question. But it couldn't just be Trump with a stroke of a pen. So there'd be a lot of debate before we got there.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing. I really appreciate it. So the 2026 elections feels very far off, and I've been reading a lot, probably too much. And you know, what a great chance the Democrats have of getting back the House. And then I read other places, oh, haha, how quaint, you think we're going to have another election and Trump's going to call off elections. I'm also aware that elections are administered through the states. We have so much to be worried about right now. Is this one of the things I need to be worried about?
No, I would say no. There will be elections in 2026. And as someone who is term limited, I don't know if I want it to come fast or not. In some ways, I enjoy what I do very much, and I enjoy working with my team. But I won't lie to you, these are tough times. I could have done, 8 years of being AG without COVID and without Trump, but I guess, you get what you get, and overall, I feel I'm luckier than most.
Hi, I'm Jenny Galley, and I'm a retired nurse. One of the things
Thank you for what you did.
Thank you. One of the things that I worry about is that all of us baby boomers are coming of age, and we need to worry about how we're going to be paying our health insurance. We paid into Social Security, we paid into Medicare. Is he considered a robber?
Yeah, well, I think...
Stealing from us.
Yeah, I understand. I think one of the things that we're certainly going to fight back when it comes to Social Security and Medicare. So right now, things are fine there. There haven't been any changes. If there are any, we're going to fight. I think it just would be really, even for him, it would be really dumb to go after those two programs. Even for him, I know he is. I know, I heard it, but of all the things, I think that one, on my list, if I've got a mental list, it's there. Not like we're not paying attention to it. And I understand, why that would be a concern to someone in retirement. But for right now, I would not worry too much about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks again for what you do. Nurses are the backbone of our healthcare system. No question.
We'll do one more question. Winner, chicken dinner.
Okay, I'm glad I'm getting mine in here. As everybody else has said, thank you for being here, Attorney General. I don't know if this is something that a state attorney general can address, but as most people know here, many of our federal agencies are being gouged out.
Yeah.
And there are thousands, many thousands of federal employees right here in the state of Rhode Island. I have a family member who's one. I have neighbors who are so as well. And so I know what's happening to them, and it's not good. And I don't think we have, as Americans, felt the effect of this as we will very soon. NIH particularly concerns me because I think thousands will die. What I want to know is, collectively, as Attorney Generals, is there anything legally you can do to counter this mass disruption of these agencies?
There is, and we have, and that's why we brought the lawsuit here in Rhode Island about those 3 smaller ones. There's a lawsuit in Massachusetts about the Department of Education that laid off, I think, nearly 50% of its workers. There's a case that I'm less familiar with, but I'm aware of, that we're a part of, but it hasn't been something that I've spent as much time on because of the case that we filed here. I just haven't gotten to it. But there is a case that's filed, I believe, is it in Maryland or DC, Sarah, about federal workers?
Maryland.
It's in Maryland. So there's a case in Maryland where we went to court with our colleagues. And didn't the court issue a TRO in that case?
Yes.
Yeah, so the court issued a TRO in that case. And so I am not dialed in to where each federal agency is in terms of these administrative layoffs, or what are called reduction in forces, or RIFs. But if you want specific answers, I can get them for you. I'll just connect you to Blake on my team, and we'll get an answer back to you tomorrow and give you an update on it. All of the actions that we have been a part of are on our website. And so it's riag.ri.gov, and if you go to that website, you can see all of the cases and the status of them and where they're filed, and links to the documents. But we can get you a more non-lawyer answer if you just reach out to us, and we'll get that to you tomorrow. Well, I guess that's it, everybody. I really enjoyed talking with you. So thanks.